she didn't make a scene. She didn't raise her voice. She simply stood still, composed and calm, yet only minutes later she was being questioned behind closed doors. Why? Because she was a black woman inside the exclusive first-class lounge. At Cleargate Airport, USA, among travelers dressed in designer labels and pulling sleek, glossy luggage, a modestly dressed woman moved quietly, trailing a worn carry-on behind her. Her eyes were peaceful, free of arrogance, yet every pair of eyes around her brimmed with suspicion. A security manager gave a cold signal. The lead flight attendant looked away, indifferent, as her radio clicked faintly. Perhaps she wasn't aware she was being observed. Maybe she knew and chose silence and composure instead. But in front of the other travelers, two security officers soon approached, their faces tight with concern, their eyes probing. What? They didn't realize was that hidden within this seemingly ordinary woman was a quiet authority that reached beyond them, all the kind of influence that could shift the fate of the airport itself. And when she reached into her bag and drew out her phone, the direction of an entire airline began to change. This wasn't just a story of racial bias. It was a moment when truth forced a system to confront itself, and everyone watched to see. What came next? The first-class lounge at Cleargate Airport is reserved for the privileged few. A luxurious space gleaming with marble floors, leather chairs, and soft music whispering affluence. The travelers here radiated power and status-tailored clothing, shining leather luggage, expensive jewelry all around. But today, something disrupted the familiar comfort. Through the crowd of extravagance walked a black woman whose mere presence shattered the polished order. Her name was Alicia Morgan. She wore a plain dress, her hair pinned back neatly. No flashy jewelry, no designer labels, no luxury handbag, just a worn Navy carry-on in one hand and a phone displaying a verified first-class e-ticket in the other. The moment Alicia stepped into the priority area, all eyes locked on her.
Our number.
Words were spoken, but the room hummed with quiet suspicion. Passengers exchanged whispers, their hidden glances brimming with doubt and curiosity. A few airport staff at a distance murmured into radios, their eyes trained on Alicia as if silently debating whether she belonged. Alicia seemed to feel the weight of their scrutiny, but her face remained serene, untouched by fear. She stood with quiet grace. Every small movement seemed magnified under their watchful gaze. Now and then, she checked her phone, calmly affirming her place there. Her stillness only sharpening their attention as, though her very presence defied an unspoken rule. Across the lounge, Rachel Barnes, the sharp-eyed security supervisor known for her strict, uncompromising demeanor, zeroed in on Alicia. Her sharp gaze moved from Alicia's scuffed shoes to the frayed edges of her carry-on. From her simple hairstyle to her unsettlingly calm expression, each detail fueled Rachel's doubts. Without delay, Rachel tapped her radio, her voice crisp and cold. Priority area, one suspicious passenger. Initiate immediate inspection. Within moments, two security officers stepped through the entrance, making their way toward Alicia. Their eyes fixed on her, radios at the ready, steps taut. With expectation, still, Alicia didn't move. She remained unshaken, perfectly composed. She understood this was only the start of what would be a difficult encounter. But what no one expected was that Alicia Morgan was no ordinary passenger. Beneath her simple appearance was a quiet power, one capable of overturning the entire dynamic of the first-class lounge. And this was only the beginning. At that moment, as the two officers approached, Rachel Barnes's eyes never left Alicia from the surveillance station. Rachel was infamous at Cleargate Airport for her icy control, her perfectionism, and her unshakable authority. With over 15 years of experience, she handled tense situations with a stone face and a voice sharp as glass. Yet today, Alicia Morgan's quiet confidence unsettled her in a way she couldn't explain. Rachel frowned, reevaluating the woman before her. Everything about Alicia clashed with Rachel's image of a first-class passenger. To Rachel, someone in this lounge had to look wealthy, impeccably dressed, visibly powerful. Alicia's modesty felt like an affront to the space Rachel managed. She glanced at the security screen. Names, seat numbers, and boarding details flickered by. Alicia Morgan, first-class priority boarding. It was clear But to Rachel, this wasn't just about paperwork. It was about deep-seated bias. Prejudice whispered that Alicia didn't belong, that she must be exploiting a loophole, worse, outright lying. Without hesitation, Rachel tapped her radio again, her words low but sharp. Verify the identity of the black woman at the end of the priority line. I want to know exactly who she is and why she's here. Her voice wasn't loud, but it sliced through the room. The security team tensed. Officers exchanged glances. They knew this wasn't standard procedure. It was personal, rooted in their supervisor's quiet prejudice. Alicia calmly waited at the checkpoint, betraying no sign of worry. Soon, a young female attendant approached, polite but wary. "Excuse me, may I recheck your ticket and ID?" "Please," Alicia, unbothered, handed over her phone and passport, as though she had anticipated this moment. But before the attendant could clear her, Rachel's voice crackled through the radio. "Hold on, don't process her yet. Ask her to explain the purpose of her trip and confirm her C-class in detail. No mistakes in the priority area." Rachel's frosty tone made the attendant pause, but she obeyed. Avoiding Alicia's steady gaze, the young woman asked softly, almost apologetically, "Miss Morgan, where can you confirm the reason for your tripand? Your C-class?" Only then did Alicia glance toward the security desk, her eyes locking with Rachel's unblinking, suspicious stare. She didn't flinch. She didn't glare. Her steady calm made it clear she understood exactly what was happening, and that she was prepared to face it with quiet, unshakable strength. "I'm flying to Seattle for business," Alicia replied, her voice clear and smooth, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "And yes, my ticket is first class." A faint, cold smile flickered on Rachel's face. Alicia had answered flawlessly. Yet Rachel remained unsatisfied. This was no longer routine security. It was a quiet battle between two women. One wielded authority and buried prejudice. The other radiated quiet dignity and unbothered strength. The tension thickened. Security staff stood frozen. Curious passengers leaned in, sensing the confrontation building. From her station, Rachel studied Alicia with the cold precision of someone waiting to find a flaw. She believed Alicia would falter. They always did. What Rachel didn't know was that Alicia Morgan was unlike anyone she had ever faced. This silent battle had barely begun, and Rachel was about to discover she had gravely underestimated the woman she decided to target. When Alicia's calm eyes met Rachel's, the entire area seemed to pause. The space around the boarding checkpoint froze. Rachel stepped down. From the surveillance station, her heels striking the marble with deliberate force. Her stare sharp, provocative. This wasn't a security check anymore. It was a quiet war between institutional authority and human dignity. Rachel stopped in front of Alicia, casting a cold glance at her phone screen, lingering long enough to assert her dominance. Then she leaned in, her voice low, every word landing like ice. "You're in the wrong line. Economy is over there." Her words were soft, but their intent was clear. Around them, passengers turned to watch, their gazes mixed curiosity and discomfort. The moment was no longer private. It was a confrontation on display for all to see. The once upscale lounge now felt stifling. Everyone in the room sensed that Rachel's actions were a deliberate attempt to belittle Alicia, and all eyes waited for an explosive reaction. But Alicia didn't take the bait. Instead of rising to anger, she lifted her chin slightly and locked eyes with Rachel. Her stare was calm, unwavering, radiating quiet resolve. A faint, measured smile appeared on her face, not the grin of someone defeated, but the expression of a person entirely confident in her own worth. "I know exactly where I belong." Alicia's poised, self-assured response caught Rachel off guard, freezing her for a split second. A spark of outrage flashed in Rachel's eyes, her pride wounded by Alicia's silent defiance. For Rachel, who prided herself on controlling every room she entered, Alicia's unshakable demeanor landed like a slap to her authority. Rachel clenched her jaw, forcing her features back into composure. She turned to the officer at her side, her eyes sharp as ice, and flicked her finger in a silent command. "Escort her to the interrogation room. We need to verify her information." The two officers immediately stepped toward Alicia, their expressions conflicted yet obedient. Alicia didn't resist. She offered no argument. She merely nodded, as though she had anticipated every moment of this. Her steps were steady, composed, dignified. The quiet hum of her suitcase, wheels rolling across the marble floor, filling the heavy silence that hung over the first-class lounge. Rachel remained rooted in place, her eyes following Alicia's retreating figure, simmering with resentment. She vowed to teach this woman the price of challenging her authority. Rachel had never felt such fury. To her, this was personal, a matter of pride. She would not rest until Alicia Morgan understood that no one defied Rachel Barnes without consequence. What Rachel didn't realize was that Alicia Morgan was far from an ordinary traveler. Beneath her modest appearance was the quiet power to bring Cleargate Airport to its knees with a single phone call. Rachel was on the brink of facing consequences far beyond anything she could have imagined. Their confrontation had only just begun, yet the tension was already razor-sharp, the stakes simmering at their peak as Alicia disappeared through the security room door. Rachel finally turned away, hiding the excitement twisting in her chest. In her mind, she believed she'd secured victory. What she failed to see was that the real battle had barely begun, and the woman she dismissed held the authority to append the entire Cleargate operation. Rachel returned to the surveillance station, her expression still glowing with triumph. For Rachel Barnes, security wasn't just a profession, it was her domain of control. She had spent 15 years enforcing strict oversight, learning to judge travelers by appearance and her own ingrained assumptions. To her, Alicia's simple clothing marked her as unworthy, regardless of the unmistakable first-class boarding pass in her hand. But what neither Rachel nor anyone else at Cleargate Airport realized was that hidden behind Alicia's unremarkable e-ticket was immense, untouchable influence. Only a day ago, Alicia Morgan had authorized an emergency $4.8 billion bailout for Grand Sky Airlines, pulling them back from the edge of collapse. Her signature meant tens of thousands of airline employees could keep their jobs, hundreds of daily flights would keep running, and the survival of one of America's historic carriers was ensured. But that wasn't all. Alicia wasn't just a top financial executive wielding serious clout. She also headed the internal special review division at the prestigious Advalink Group, department tasked with conducting covert inspections of ethics and service standards. Among critical partners, today's first-class ticket wasn't for leisure. It was part of a Level 3 mystery audit Alicia had initiated quietly, one Grand Sky's leadership knew nothing about until this very moment. Alicia understood that the only way to evaluate integrity and treatment is to disappear into the crowd. No designer wardrobe, no visible signs of wealth. Her plain attire, soft-spoken nature, and quiet confidence were all calculated moves. She wasn't here to enjoy the amenities. She was here to observe whether every staff member, from executives to frontline personnel, honored their duty to respect all passengers equally. And from the moment she arrived, Alicia had seen the undercurrent of bias woven into Cleargate's operations. Rachel Barnes, a manager entrusted with professionalism and fairness, had instead allowed her personal prejudices to cloud her judgment, dismissing and humiliating a passenger who didn't conform to her narrow standards of luxury. Now, under the sterile light of the small interrogation room, Alicia sat unshaken. Fear was absent. Regret was non-existent. If anything, the incident reinforced how vital her mission was. This wasn't merely about airline service. It was a broader message to every public servant: never compromise someone's dignity. Outside, Rachel still believed Alicia would soon crumble, apologize, slink away in embarrassment. She had no idea that her arrogance and persistent bias were driving the very airline she vowed to defend toward disaster, jeopardizing nearly $5 billion. In crucial financial lifelines, Rachel Barnes had underestimated the woman she tried so hard to belittle. But she was about to learn that Alicia Morgan was not simply a first-class traveler. She held Grand Sky Airlines' entire future in the palm of her hand. This wasn't over. It was only the beginning. In the cold, private room, the faint buzz of a neon light bathed the space in a sterile glow as Alicia sat straight-backed, her hands resting lightly atop the metal table. Her face betrayed no emotion. Her eyes were sharp, steady, unwavering. The door clicked shut behind her. Alicia knew the next few minutes would expose the deepest, quietest prejudices, the kind that thrives in shadows. Across from her sat a tall security officer, his expression carved from stone. He opened a notebook, his frosty gaze scanning Alicia with brazen judgment before he spoke in a low, loaded tone. "Your full name? Alicia Morgan?" Her reply was crisp, unwavering. The officer scribbled a note, his eyes returning to hers, hard and suspicious. "What's the purpose of your trip today?" "Business." Alicia's tone was calm, providing no additional details. The officer sneered slightly, suspicion clouding his face as his eyes flicked over her simple gray turtleneck, plain slacks, and modest leather shoes. She didn't fit the VIP image he was used to seeing. "If this is a business trip," he scoffed, "then why are you dressed like that?" His tone was biting, the insinuation clear. Her appearance questioned her worth. Alicia's expression didn't change. She tilted her head slightly, her gaze gentle, yet cutting. "What I wear has nothing to do with the nature of my trip." "What exactly are you implying?" the officer faltered, unprepared for such composed defiance. He motioned to a female officer who began searching Alicia's small canvas bag. Inside, she found a laptop, a notebook, and a large sealed envelope. Its crimson wax seal bearing the Advalink Group emblem. The woman held up the envelope, brows raised. "What's this?" "Work documents." Alicia's reply was firm, her voice unwavering. "We'll need to inspect it," the officer declared, reaching toward the seal. Before she could touch it, Alicia's voice cut through the room, measured, commanding to open that. "You'll need legal counsel and a court order? Anything else would be illegal." The room froze. The officers exchanged glances, visibly startled by her calm assertion of her rights. They had never encountered a traveler so unshaken, so in control. In the surveillance room, Rachel watched the feed. Her smug grin faltered, irritation creeping across her face as she realized Alicia wasn't backing down. Her legal knowledge and quiet authority unsettled Rachel more than any protest could have. Inside the room, Alicia remained silent. She retrieved the envelope, slid it back into her bag, and zipped it shut, a quiet but clear declaration of power. Her gaze met the officer's, steady and composed. "If this is a random check, note it in your report. If someone specifically ordered this, I want a written reason." The officers were speechless. The balance of control had shifted. Alicia Morgan now held command of the moment. The door opened once more.
Ow.
The two officers, visibly uneasy, signaled for her to exit. Alicia stood, her posture steady, her steps deliberate. She showed no emotion, only unwavering purpose. Back at the monitor, Rachel's expression flickered between irritation and disbelief. The authority she once wore like armor was cracking. The woman she had dismissed so easily was leaving that room carrying the real influence. What Rachel didn't yet realize was that Alicia had recorded every word, every detail, ready to use it in her internal investigation. This wasn't merely a personal confrontation anymore. It was about standing up for every traveler vulnerable to unseen prejudice. The battle between control and fairness wasn't over. But Alicia was ready. She knew her quiet resolve was the sharpest weapon she possessed. As the door to the interview room clicked shut behind Alicia, Rachel remained fixated on the security screens, a faint cold grin curling on her lips, a grin of pure satisfaction. She'd always believed that anyone bold enough to challenge her would eventually buckle. But today, this seemingly ordinary woman had shown Rachel just how absolute her control could be. Crossing her arms, Rachel leaned back in her expensive leather chair, sipping her now cold coffee. Her eyes lingered on Alicia's face, on the monitor defiant. Composed Dan that only deepened Rachel's irritation, strengthening her desire to put this woman in her place. Turning to the closest officer, Rachel's voice oozed condescension. "Look at her acting like she's untouchable. It's absurd. Someone like her thinking a plane ticket buys her entry into our world." The younger officer beside her forced a weak nod, an uncomfortable smile tugging at his lips. But he, like the others, stayed silent. They all knew Rachel's reputation, the kind of authority that silenced dissent and destroyed opposition. This wasn't about petty revenge for Rachel. Alicia was going to be an example, a warning to anyone foolish enough to believe they could challenge her and escape humiliation. To Rachel, power wasn't earned, it was demanded. What she failed to realize was that her smug arrogance, her sneering remarks, and her thinly veiled hostility were all being captured on hidden video. Alicia hadn't walked into Cleargate Airport unprepared. A discreet, independent camera, entirely separate from airport security, had been recording the entire time Rachel's demeaning tone, her insults, her gleeful contempt. Every moment would be crucial evidence for Alicia's covert ethics audit of Grand Sky Airlines. Rachel, oblivious to her looming downfall, reclined comfortably, eyes glued to the monitors. She didn't recognize that her smugness was endangering the very company she thought she was safeguarding. She didn't see how her malice betrayed the values Grand Sky publicly touted: dignity, quality, integrity. She checked her watch, confident. Alicia would soon leave, humiliated and broken beneath Rachel's authority. But when Alicia stepped out, it wasn't the picture Rachel had painted in her head. Alicia walked with silent confidence, her expression unreadable, her composure untouched. Security officers hesitated, uncertain. But Alicia understood now. Exactly where true influence lands, she intended to use it not for revenge, but to reaffirm something far greater: every human being's right to dignity. From her supposedly secure position, Rachel had no clue the irreversible mistake she'd made. Her words and actions were about to unravel everything she believed untouchable. The hidden battle she was convinced she'd won had already slipped from her grasp. The woman she had most underestimated, Alicia Morgan, was already holding the outcome in her hands. Boarding the plane, Alicia knew the story wasn't over. The quiet war against prejudice was only beginning, the moment she appeared at the first-class cabin entrance. Curious, guarded eyes snapped toward her. Suspicion mingled with surprise, as though she were an unwelcome outsider. Despite the demeaning, unjust interrogation she had endured, Alicia remained composed, moving to her assigned seat without hesitation. Not long after, Sarah Barnes, the lead flight attendant and Rachel's cousin, began first-class service. Like her relative, Sarah was known for flawless professionalism, but beneath the polished exterior lurked a quiet cruelty. She judged passengers by their appearance, their status, their pedigree. Having already heard Rachel's version of the strange woman from the lounge, Sarah had made up her mind. Alicia would not enjoy even a moment's peace aboard this flight. With her rehearsed smile, Sarah glided down the aisle, offering hot towels and champagne. Her warmth reserved for passengers she deemed worthy. But when she reached Alicia's row, her facade froze. She cast Alicia a dismissive glance, then pivoted away as though the seat were empty. It was a deliberate snub, a clear message to Alicia and everyone watching that this passenger didn't belong. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably. A few exchanged whispers, others cast disapproving looks. No one intervened. Next to Alicia sat a middle-aged man in a tailored suit, Rolex gleaming on his wrist. He'd observed Alicia's arrival, and Sarah's cold dismissal only fueled his arrogance. Leaning slightly toward Alicia, a smirk curling his lips, he muttered just loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Seems like first-class seats are easier to buy these days, huh?" Some looked away, complicit in their silence, but Alicia didn't respond the way he anticipated. She turned her head, her gaze calm and direct. With a gentle smile and a razor-sharp edge in her tone, she replied, "If you think money alone earns you respect here, you're more out of place than I am." The man stiffened, momentarily exposed. His bravado faltered. He shifted in his seat, unwilling to continue. Alicia said nothing more. Her composure perfect. But inside, she knew this was far from over. Up front, Sarah glanced back. Seeing the man silenced only deepened her satisfaction. To her, Alicia was an uninvited guest, an anomaly to be corrected. In Sarah's eyes, first class demanded a certain image that Alicia didn't fit. What neither Sarah nor Rachel realized was how deeply they'd stepped into Alicia's trap. Beneath Alicia's modest appearance lay substantial influence. Every slight, every insult, every sneer was being quietly documented by her hidden camera. That footage would be the cornerstone of her internal investigation to Grand Sky Airlines. But, for now, Sarah remained oblivious. She returned to her duties, charming passengers. Blissfully confident in her petty victory, Alicia sat quietly, her gaze drifting to the window. The sky outside was a calm, endless blue, belying the storm of discrimination brewing inside the cabin. This flight was only the first chapter. Individuals who had belittled her would soon confront the full consequences of their actions. Alicia wasn't here to prove she deserved the seat. She was here to prove that no one, no matter their status, had the right to demean another human being. The hidden war Sarah and Rachel believed they controlled was already shifting in Alicia's favor as she stared into the endless sky, lost. In her thoughts, a sharp voice interrupted. "Miss Morgan," came the cool, rehearsed tone. "We'll need you to relocate to the rear of the plane for weight distribution." Sarah Barnes stood before her, all faux professionalism masking the venom beneath. She spoke loudly, ensuring nearby passengers heard every word. Drawing stares in Alicia's direction, Alicia turned, her eyes locking with Sarah's, holding the silence for a moment. A silent confirmation that the insult had been received loud. And cleared the brief pause unsettled Sarah, but she masked it quickly, her expression hardening with challenge. Alicia recognized the game. This wasn't about aircraft safety. It was a calculated humiliation. But what Sarah didn't understand was that Alicia wasn't just playing along, she was documenting every moment. The real reckoning was still to come. "Would you like the next scene written where?" Alicia responds. "Or would you prefer this entire piece as a screenplay format?" "Weight distribution," Alicia echoed steadily, articulating each syllable with clear authority. "Then explain why I'm the only person being told to change seats." Sarah froze in place. She was accustomed to passengers complying without question, but Alicia's unshaken confidence left no space for her prejudice to hide. All around them, fellow travelers leaned in, some trading puzzled glances, others murmuring quietly, their eyes revealing growing skepticism about the flight attendant's weak excuse. The atmosphere inside the cabin thickened with tension, becoming nearly suffocating. Flustered, Sarah finally managed to stammer, "It's standard procedure. We'd appreciate your cooperation." "Da!" But her shaky explanation only damaged her credibility further. Now, the unfairness and absurdity of her request were evident to everyone watching. Desperately, Sarah searched the faces nearby for support, but no one spoke. Everyone recognized the serious mistake she'd just made, openly targeting a passenger so blatantly. Alicia remained silent. Calmly, she reached for her phone and opened the secure internal app of Advalink Group. Her fingers moved steadily as she typed a short yet decisive message. Level 3 audit finalized. Launch formal internal investigation now. Within moments, the message was sent. Alicia understood this marked the beginning every discriminatory act by Rachel, Mr. and their team was now evidence in an unstoppable internal review. Sarah sensed she'd committed a grave error, but couldn't grasp how serious it truly was. In her eyes, Alicia still appeared to be just another passenger, someone easily dismissed. But soon enough, Sarah would confront the heavy consequences of her prejudice and arrogance. Alicia placed her phone down and turned her gaze back toward Sarah, sharp, unwavering, and colder than before. "If your concern is truly weight distribution, maybe the problem isn't my seat," Alicia added evenly. Drained of all color, she stumbled a step backward, utterly speechless. The cabin fell eerily silent. Alicia sat still, expression composed. But the sheer quiet strength in her poise sent cracks through Sarah and Rachel's fragile false authority. Minutes before takeoff, neither woman could imagine the magnitude of what had just been set in motion. Sarah's insulting demand had triggered an extensive internal investigation, one that would ripple far beyond their job descriptions. Woman they had underestimated and mistreated, Alicia Morgan, now held real influence, enough to alter the fate of Grand Sky Airlines itself. The hidden power struggle Rachel and Sarah thought they controlled had flipped completely. Alicia said nothing further. She was ready, knowing the final outcome of this conflict now rested entirely in her hands. The moment the aircraft's wheels touched down on Seattle's runway, the cabin practically vibrated with unresolved tension. Alicia remained collected and polite, unfazed by the ordeal behind her. But she knew the critical moment had arrived. Once the plane stopped completely and the door opened, an airport official approached her with a grave expression. "Miss Morgan, please come with us." Alicia didn't react with surprise or resistance. Gracefully, she rose from her seat, her eyes briefly settling on Sarah Barnes, the lead flight attendant, still lingering nearby. Visibly unsettled by Alicia's calm, commanding presence, within minutes, Alicia was escorted into a small, stark conference room within the airport's secure zone. A long, polished table occupied the center, surrounded by swivel chairs. Seated already were a senior Grand Sky Airlines executive too. Uniformed security officers, Sarah Barnes, her face pale and tense, and a serious FAA official observing intently. The room fell quiet the moment Alicia entered, suspicion hanging thick in the air, as though they expected her to crumble into excuses or apologies. But Alicia remained composed. She sat down, scanning each face before letting her gaze rest on Sarah, whose panic was impossible to hide. Sarah's trembling hands clenched atop the table, fully realizing now she had stumbled into a confrontation far beyond her control. The Grand Sky representative finally broke the silence. His tone stiff. "Miss Morgan, we've received reports claiming you disrupted the flight and refused to comply with safety instructions from our staff." Alicia didn't respond immediately. Instead, she calmly reached into her bag, retrieving a large, red wax-sealed envelope stamped with Advalink Group's crest. Her movements were deliberate and authoritative, filling the room with quiet anticipation. She broke the seal and pulled out a high-quality document displaying her name and senior title at Advalink Group. Placing it firmly on the table, she spoke, her words precise, carrying the full weight of her position. "I am Alicia Morgan, Senior Ethics Auditor for Advalink Group." She paused, her eyes meeting each person's gaze before continuing firmly. "I regret to inform you that Grand Sky Airlines has completely failed this audit." Shock rippled through the room instantly. Airline executive's face paled, blindsided by the revelation of this covert audit. The security officers exchanged stunned looks, while the FAA official began rapidly scribbling notes. Across the table, Sarah's posture stiffened, her face drained of color. Immediately, how severe this situation had become. No one had suspected that the unassuming woman they chose to mistreat possessed the authority to influence the airline's financial standing and public reputation. Alicia's composure remained, but her voice sharpened, steady and unforgiving. "Every act of discrimination, disrespect, and humiliation I experienced today has been fully documented. What disappoints me most isn't merely the behavior of certain individuals, it's the culture of prejudice, tolerated at Grand Sky's leadership level." The airline executive opened his mouth, preparing a weak apology, but Alicia raised her hand, stopping him cold. "I'm not here for an apology," she stated flatly, locking eyes with him. "What I expect is for this airline to demonstrate the courage to face its systemic failures and correct them." No one spoke. The quiet power in Alicia's words filled the room, leaving no room for denial. The confrontation Rachel and Sarah thought they controlled had spiraled into a full-scale crisis, one entirely beyond their ability to reverse. Alicia leaned back slightly, her expression unwavering. But it was clear to everyone present, Alicia Morgan wasn't simply an influential auditor. She represented a hard truth. Those who mistreat others will inevitably face the consequences. And from this point on, the fates of Rachel, Sarah, and Grand Sky Airlines rested solely in Alicia's capable hands, the same woman they had arrogantly and cruelly underestimated. The conference room buzzed with strained silence, the tension nearly unbearable. Every gaze remained locked on Alicia, her earth-shaking revelation still echoing in the air. But she didn't keep them waiting long. Calmly, she reached for her phone, connected it to the large screen at the far end of the room. "I believe it's time you see the reality for yourselves," Alicia declared, her voice cool and resolute. Within seconds, the screen lit up, playing high-definition footage, hidden recordings of Rachel Barnes and Sarah Barnes engaging in blatant racial discrimination. Their dismissive glares, demeaning remarks, and smug expressions played out, in vivid clarity, impossible to deny. Every word, every action laid bare, the airline executive's face drained of color, horror widening his eyes as he realized that what he'd mistaken for routine professionalism was undeniable evidence of ingrained prejudice. Across the room, Sarah sat frozen, her body trembling, cold sweat gathering at her temples. She watched in stunned horror as her own behavior and Rachel's was exposed before the unforgiving eyes of the FAA, official, and the airline's top brass. The airline representative stood slowly, his posture slumped with defeat. His voice cracked as he addressed Alicia. "Miss Morgan, on behalf of Grand Sky Airlines, I extend our sincerest apologies. This behavior is completely unacceptable." And Alicia lifted her hand, silencing him. Her gaze was sharp, unwavering. "I'm not interested in apologies," she stated plainly, her eyes locked on his. "What I want is accountability. Acknowledgement of your broken culture and actual change." The room sank into heavy silence once more. A silence, dense with humiliation and regret. Alicia wasn't here for hollow words. She was here to demand real transformation. And every person in that room understood. Alicia Morgan stood for a power greater than any one passenger's complaint. She embodied the consequences of arrogance, prejudice, and underestimation. She possessed the authority to compel the airline to face reality and accept accountability. Sarah, now completely shattered, struggled to breathe. She understood that her career with Grand Sky Airlines had effectively ended inside that small, windowless office. The FAA representative finally spoke, his voice steady, somber, and commanding. "This documentation exposes a grave ethical failure and severe shortcomings in service standards at Grand Sky Airlines. We expect a comprehensive, immediate report detailing your corrective actions." Alicia's eyes moved across the gathering of executives and officials. Her face was cold, yet driven by purpose. Grand Sky Airlines has received repeated warnings about discriminatory practices. Still, no significant changes have been made. Today, I demand more than isolated dismissals. I expect a complete overhaul of your internal structures to eliminate this toxic environment permanently. Her statement landed like a final judgment, firm, unyielding, absolute. Alicia understood that true reform wouldn't arise from shallow apologies. It required deep introspection and the bravery to confront uncomfortable realities. At that moment, the airline's representative lowered his head in silent acknowledgement. He recognized that the company was now entangled in a profound crisis. Rachel, Sarah, and all who had belittled Alicia grasped the harsh truth: the price of their bias far exceeded lost jobs or tarnished reputations. It threatened to dismantle an entrenched, corrupt hierarchy. Alicia stood slowly, retrieving her sealed envelope with quiet determination. Her battle had never been solely for her own dignity, but for every person harmed by injustice, and she would not stop there. The covert conflict Rachel and Sarah believed they controlled had reached its undeniable conclusion. Victory rested entirely with Alicia Morgan, the modest woman they had foolishly dismissed. They had learned a painful lesson. Prejudice and discrimination never triumph over courage and plain truth. As Alicia exited the small conference room, a heavy, suffocating silence filled the air. The reality exposed within those walls forced everyone present to confront an unexpected, harsh reckoning. None of them could have predicted how swiftly and ruthlessly the consequences would consume Grand Sky Airlines. Less than a full day after that intense meeting, Advalink Group, the airline's most influential and indispensable financial eye, publicly declared the indefinite suspension of all merger discussions with Grand Sky. The tour's uncompromising public statements spread like wildfire across global news outlets, sending shockwaves through both aviation and financial markets. Almost immediately, the critical $4.88 billion bailout, the airline's sole lifeline during months of crisis, was frozen. Investors withdrew en masse. Grand. Sky's stock plummeted relentlessly, and the airline's leadership was left paralyzed and rudderless. In mere hours, the once prestigious airline teetered on the verge of bankruptcy, staring down the greatest threat in its history. Inside company walls, the fallout was immediate and severe, especially for Rachel and Sarah Barnes. The central figures in the discrimination scandal, Rachel Barnes, long known for her iron grip on Cleargate Airport, received an indefinite suspension. The notice arrived at her office cold final, offering no room for explanation. Her decades-long career crumbled within hours. At the same time, Sarah Barnes, the lead flight attendant, whose disdain toward Alicia ignited the entire ordeal, faced equally harsh repercussions. Grand Sky permanently barred her from all first-class service roles. Every privilege, perk, and ounce of status she once enjoyed vanished. She was reassigned to low-profile domestic flights, left to rebuild her career under the shadow of disgrace. But the consequences reached far beyond Rachel and Sarah. Every employee, directly or indirectly linked to the incident, was required to undergo specialized anti-discrimination training designed personally by Alicia Morgan. This was no symbolic gesture. It was a sweeping, systemic transformation of corporate culture, an uncompromising lesson in dignity, equality, and respect. Alicia's goal was simple: ensure that such injustice never again took root at Grand Sky. Across the airline's offices, disorder and gloom reigned. The department spiraled into confusion. Hundreds of frantic emails and phone calls flew back and forth as staff scrambled to comprehend how one seemingly isolated incident had spiraled into a financial disaster of this scale. In a desperate attempt to regain control, Grand Sky's board convened an emergency meeting to strategize a path forward. But it was clear there would be no evading responsibility this time. The collapse they now faced wasn't the fault of a few rogue individuals. It was the inevitable result of a culture long plagued by favoritism, bias, and injustice. Elsewhere, Alicia Morgan received the unfolding news with quiet resolve. She felt no satisfaction in witnessing the downfall. Of Rachel and Sarah, only the assurance that justice had prevailed. Her mission had never been punishment for its own sake, but authentic, lasting transformation, a deep-rooted change in mindset, behavior, and how people treated one another, regardless of status or appearance. For Grand Sky Airlines, the severe consequences they now endured weren't just a warning about discrimination. They served as a loud, undeniable message to the entire service industry. No one holds the right to demean others, and prejudice carries an unbearable price. The battle Rachel and Sarah once believed they could easily win had reached its inevitable conclusion, and the outcome was far from what they imagined. Alicia Morgan, the quiet woman they so recklessly dismissed, had dismantled their influence and prestige, dragging them, along with the entire airline, into a reality they had never prepared for. 1 week after the unprecedented crisis Cleargate, airport gradually returned to its usual pace. Stylish travelers, polished luggage, and busy flights once more filled the terminals with familiar activity. Yet whispers of the scandal drifted through the crowds, a lingering reminder of how destructive prejudice and bias can be. Late one afternoon, Alicia returned to Cleargate, this time for a different reason. Gone were the hostile stares and spiteful remarks. She walked through the terminal with her familiar, quiet confidence. Her expression calm, free of arrogance, only the quiet fulfillment of knowing that justice had prevailed. Her eyes landed on a familiar face seated behind a small customer service desk near the public arrivals area. It was Rachel Barnes, the same woman who had once belittled and insulted her with such cruelty. Now stripped of authority, Rachel sat in a plain uniform, her name tag and title gone. The icy confidence she once wore, like armor, had been replaced by weariness and remorse. Alicia paused, observing from a distance. There was no triumph in her gaze, only quiet sadness for someone who had once held the chance to do right but had chosen prejudice and pride instead. Feeling someone's eyes upon her, Rachel looked up. When their gazes met, Rachel trembled, shame and fear flickering across her features. In that instant, Alicia saw that Rachel finally grasped the gravity of her mistakes. But it was far too late to rewrite the past. Alicia stepped forward, stopping in front of the desk. Head bowed, Rachel muttered awkwardly, I'm sorry." Alicia didn't respond at once. She held Rachel's gaze for a long, silent moment before speaking gently. "You were right about one thing, Rachel," she began, her voice soft, yet powerful, each word etched in Rachel's mind. "I'm not like most people in first class." Her tone was calm but firm. "I didn't come here for a seat. Came to see how many still remember what it means to treat another person with basic decency." Her words carried no spite, only profound strength and compassion. Tears filled Rachel's eyes as the true weight of her actions finally settled upon her. Alicia offered a small nod, then turned and walked away, leaving Rachel speechless. Passersby, staff members, and others who overheard the quiet exchange paused, struck by the depth of the moment. This wasn't about flaunting victory. It was Alicia's way of delivering a deeper message. Human dignity isn't defined by appearances or status. It is reflected in the respect and empathy we extend to one another. From that day forward, Alicia Morgan's story became a lasting lesson in honor, humility, and humanity. Those who once discriminated learned that prejudice cannot prevail over courage and truth, and that real strength is found not in threats, but in kindness and the willingness to change. As Alicia disappeared into the busy crowd, she never looked back. Around her, the airport quieted, its atmosphere heavy with reflection, as if each person present silently absorbed the lesson. And so, Alicia Morgan's journey concluded not merely as a personal triumph over injustice, but as the victory of empathy and human decency over pride and prejudice. A truth we should all carry forward. We must always treat each other with dignity and compassion, for in the end, that is our greatest strength. If this story moved you or gave you something to ponder, please like, share, and subscribe for more thought-provoking stories. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you next time.